11 meters. That's the distance between the penalty spot and the goal line. A struck ball covers it in about 400 milliseconds, less than half a second, faster than a heartbeat. This summer, across 3 countries, the biggest World Cup in history will be played. 48 teams, 104 matches. More knockout games than any tournament ever staged, which means more penalty shootouts than ever before. And somewhere in one of those shootouts, a goalkeeper will dive to the correct corner, push the ball wide, and save his country's tournament. Here's the part nobody talks about. He will never see the ball leave the boot. He physically can't, and once you understand why, you'll start to wonder who is really making your decisions. Not his, yours. Start with the math, because the math is brutal. A professional penalty travels at around 110 kilometers per hour. From 11 meters, that's 400 to 500 milliseconds of flight. Now measure the goalkeeper. Human visual reaction time, just to register that something has happened, is about 200 to 250 milliseconds. A full dive, from standing to fingertips in the corner, takes another 500 to 700. Add it up. If the keeper waits to see where the ball is going, it has already crossed the line before his body leaves the ground. There is no version of this where reaction wins. Every penalty save you have ever watched, every famous dive frozen on a poster, was committed before the ball existed in flight. This wasn't reflex, it was prophecy. So how does anyone save anything? Berlin, June 30th, 2006, World Cup quarterfinal, Germany against Argentina. 120 minutes of football have settled nothing. The Olympic Stadium holds 72,000 people, and all of them know what comes next: penalties. The German goalkeeper is Jens Lehmann. As he walks toward his goal, he pulls a crumpled piece of paper from his sock. It was pressed into his hand minutes earlier by the goalkeeping coach, scribbled on a sheet torn from a hotel notepad. On it, in handwriting Lehmann can barely read, are notes about each Argentine shooter, which side they favor, how long their run-up is, what they do when the pressure gets heavy. Before every penalty, Lehmann takes out the paper and studies it, slowly, deliberately, in full view of the man about to shoot. Some of the names on the note don't even end up taking penalties. It doesn't matter. The Argentine players watch him read, and they start to wonder what he knows. He saves 2. Germany goes through, and that scrap of paper, sweat-stained and barely legible, now sits behind glass in a German history museum, displayed like a medieval relic, a nation's World Cup run preserved on hotel stationery. Here's what the note really was. It was a confession that the dive is never instinct. It's a prediction loaded in advance, waiting for a trigger. Scientists have measured this directly. Researchers put eye-tracking equipment on elite goalkeepers and compared them to amateurs, and the difference is strange. The amateurs stare at the ball, hypnotized, and dive late. The experts barely look at it. They watch the run-up. The angle of the hips, the planted foot beside the ball, which points, almost honestly, toward the corner the shooter has chosen. The shooter's body confesses before the shooter finishes the act. The keeper isn't reading the shot. He's reading the man. But there's a darker layer to this, and it comes from a study most fans have never heard of. In 2007, an Israeli researcher named Michael Bar-Elai analyzed hundreds of penalty kicks from professional leagues and international tournaments. He logged where every shot went and what every goalkeeper did. Goalkeepers, he found, dive on about 94% of penalties, left or right, almost every single time. But nearly a third of penalties are struck down the middle, right where the keeper was just standing. Statistically, staying put would stop more shots than diving. The keepers were shown the numbers. Most of them kept diving anyway. When researchers asked why, the answer came down to how it looks. A goalkeeper who dives the wrong way and concedes is a man who tried. A goalkeeper who stands still while the ball flies past his shoulder is a man who froze. The dive, even the wrong dive, looks like a decision. Standing still looks like nothing at all. Researchers call it action bias. Humans will pay a real cost in goals, in money, in outcomes, just to feel like they chose. Hold on to that, because now we have to leave the stadium. A laboratory in San Francisco, 1983. A neuroscientist named Benjamin Libet wires volunteers with electrodes and sits them in front of a specially designed clock with a fast-moving dot. The task is almost insultingly simple. Whenever you feel like it, flick your wrist, and note the exact position of the dot at the moment you decided to do it. Libet measures 3 things: when the brain starts preparing the movement, when the person feels they decided, and when the wrist actually moves. The order should be obvious: decision, then brain, then movement. That is not what he found. The brain's activity, something called the readiness potential, began about 550 milliseconds before the movement. The conscious feeling of deciding arrived only 200 milliseconds before. The brain was already in motion a third of a second before the person felt themselves choose. The decision happened first. The experience of deciding came after. Libet himself was disturbed by the result. He spent years looking for an escape hatch, some way to preserve the version of free will we all feel from the inside. Decades later, a neuroscientist in Berlin named John Dylan Haynes ran ran a version of the experiment inside a brain scanner and reported patterns of activity that hinted at a person's upcoming choice up to 7 seconds before they were aware of making it. Scientists still argue about exactly what these experiments mean, but the timing problem has never gone away. Now go back to the penalty spot. The goalkeeper who saves the World Cup never sees the ball leave the boot. His brain committed to the corner before his conscious mind caught up. The dive was already happening when he decided to dive. The choice he'll describe in the post-match interview, the moment he'll say he just had a feeling, was written by machinery he has never met. And here's the part that should unsettle you. You work the same way. Every time you flinched before you knew why. Every time your foot hit the brake before you saw the danger. Every time a word left your mouth and you heard it at the same time everyone else did. The action came first. The story of choosing came after, smooth and confident, like it had been in charge all along. So why are we built like this? Because for 300,000 years, the present arrived too late. Think about what our ancestors actually faced. A thrown spear, a snapped branch overhead, a predator breaking from cover at the edge of the grass. By the time light reaches your eye, travels your optic nerve, and gets assembled into a conscious picture, roughly a tenth of a second has passed. In that tenth of a second, a charging animal covers 2 meters. The world you consciously see is already gone. Perception runs behind reality. It always has. So the brain stopped waiting. Neuroscientists increasingly describe it as a prediction machine, an organ that lives slightly in the future, constantly guessing what is about to happen and acting on the guess before the evidence arrives. It even edits what you see to hide the lag, smoothing the seams so the world feels live when it's closer to a broadcast on a short delay. The conscious mind, the voice you think of as you, gets the report afterward and writes it up as a decision. This wasn't a design flaw. It was the only way to survive. An animal that waits for certainty is an animal that gets hit. What most people miss is that consciousness was never the author. It was the narrator, a press officer for a government that has already acted. Now come back to 2026. Picture the moment that is coming. A stadium of 80,000 people, somewhere in Dallas or Mexico City or Toronto, completely silent. A billion more watching at home. A shooter placing the ball on the spot, wiping his hands on his shirt. A goalkeeper bouncing on his line, arms spread, pretending he hasn't already chosen. 400 milliseconds later, one of them will be a hero, and 80,000 people will roar at what they believe they just watched. A battle of will, of nerve, of choice. But you'll know what it really was. 2 nervous systems making predictions in the dark milliseconds before either man knew his own move. A guess dressed up as a decision performed in front of the world. That is not an accident. That is the oldest arrangement in your skull. And it doesn't end at the stadium gates. It follows you home. The job you took. The thing you said this morning. The person you trusted. Each one arrived with that same feeling of authorship. That clean sensation of I decided this. The research suggests the feeling is real, but the timing is wrong. The choice was forming in the dark before the narrator picked up the pen. The goalkeeper never sees the ball leave the boot. Neither do you.